My name's Denise Jenkins. I'm the Education Grants Officer here at the Foundation. I would like to welcome each one of you here tonight. We are very excited about tonight. We've been excited about our whole series of education speakers. For those of you who don't know, we started this the end of last year, and we'll continue for next year as well. We've had some wonderful speakers here, and the main reason that we want to do this, you know, when we give education grants, there's only so much money, quite frankly. We have here at the Rhode Island Foundation, we have a much bigger commitment to education than just grants. We feel it's our responsibility to gather people together to talk about new trends. About 4 years ago, our board entered into a strategic planning process, and in the end, they came out designating that education and health would be our top 2 priorities. We fund all the other sectors still at the same level, but these are going to be our top 2 priorities. And our CEO, Neil Steinberg, who's there in the back, has really taken this on, and I want to thank both the board and Neil for doing this. If somebody had said to me 4 years ago, well, you think there'd be collaborations in education in Rhode Island, I would have said, Because quite frankly, when I had been in schools, I tried that and tried it, and it was really so much like knocking your head against a wall all the time. I am truly excited with some of the wonderful things that are happening in the state of Rhode Island right now. And tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit about collaboration, and you're going to see some real live collaborations, which I think most of us never thought would happen. Collaborations with public charters and the districts that they're in. This is happening in a few places now, in a few schools, and we have visions of taking that statewide. Collaborations between the teachers' union and the superintendent's office. Now, considering in Providence, the teachers all lost their job a year ago, but that this collaboration is still going on, it is truly exciting and encouraging, because I believe strongly it is only through collaboration that we can improve and move school improvement for all children in this state. So with that said, I'd like to thank also the Annenberg Institute for School Reform for co-sponsoring this with us, and I would like to introduce their executive director, my esteemed colleague, Warren Simmons.
Who is beloved in Rhode Island, I should add. Yeah. Right? Yeah. That's what I thought. But you know, the larger purpose of this conversation series is not to position the national speaker as an expert, but as a resource person who can strengthen the local conversation that's also led by local experts. And so we want to have a dialogue with some examples nationally that either reinforces or challenges us about the work that we are doing locally. The audience here is a cross-sector audience, a business community, philanthropic community, educators, grassroots, activists, school leaders, whether traditional or charter, and just plain interested parties. Because at the Annenberg Institute, we believe that to create effective systems, you not only need to create smart schools and embed them in smart districts or alternative systems, but they also have to be embedded in a larger community that supports education reform, in much the way the Children and Youth Cabinet in Providence is trying to work in many other places where museums, cultural institutions, nonprofit organizations like the College Crusade and the Providence Plan are all working systemically in partnership with schools and unions and higher education institutions to create what we call a smarter, larger education system. And so this is a very appropriate conversation because it's going to be led by Don Shalvey, who's the Deputy Director of U.S. Programs at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But Don is a person that I've known, like most people I've known because of my age, lots of years. I realized all my friends are now old friends. I can't avoid saying that. But Don has, he's a great example of a person who's a pragmatic idealist. He's not an ideologue. He doesn't believe in either ors. He believes in both and. So he's led traditional schools. He's been a superintendent. He's led and created one of the first charter management organizations, Aspire. And he's now at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation promoting district charter collaborations because he believes that the collaboration between the two can strengthen both sides and further our goals of having children who are college ready, ready for a global economy, but also who are assets to their families and communities. So without further ado, I'm going to have Don come up and inspire us as he did Aspire.
Good evening. Come on, we can do better. Good evening. Oh. Thanks, Denise. Thanks, Warren. I am going to spend about 20 minutes doing a tour de force around this notion of collaboration. And for those of you that don't know me so well, in a former life, I was a disc jockey. So you will, you'll begin to get the notion.
People, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown. There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear.
So, those were all clustered around 1966, 67. My first year as a public school teacher. So I go back a ways. And I think I maintained the same level of encouragement that I did then. So in Neil Simon's The Goodbye Girl, Elliot Garfield, the protagonist, laments that there's only one thing worse than a hopeless romantic, and that's a hopeful one. So now, you know, in what might be year 44, although I don't actually consider working at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation education directly, after you do the work as a teacher and vice principal and all of that work, that's a far cry from reality that all of you, face each day. So I sort of bring that background to the work.
I used to rule the world. Seas would rise when I gave the word. Now in the morning I sleep alone. Sweep the streets I used to own.
I would say that that's the superintendent's theme song from Coldplay. And use that to say that for those of us that were school district superintendents back in the late 80s and early 90s, we used to rule part of the world. And I think this is what the point I'm trying to make is that the world changes at times. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about this thing called the charter school landscape. So come June of this year, essentially the charter school movement in this country celebrates its 20th year as a sort of innovation. Many of us have lived through some of those other innovations before. Open classrooms, new math, I mean a bunch of stuff that that didn't last long. And there was some wonder about whether this would last long. Because in basically 1992, 93, there were 26 charter schools in the country. They were considered outrageous, crazed, anti-public school sentiment.
Don't you know they're talking about a revolution?
And I think in the early days of the charter school movement, there was a bit of this feeling that this is about a revolution. And as I would remind colleagues in this, early on, superintendents don't get up each morning and say, how can I screw kids' lives up? That's not what they do. But in those early days, there was that notion. By 1999, there were sort of 1,500 charters, sort of nationally, sort of still an outrage. I had the privilege of working with a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, and by that time had decided that, quite frankly, in a lot of places in this country, there's been public school choice, existed for years. I was the superintendent in a blessed community in Silicon Valley, and what became pretty clear to me is that if you could afford to live in a place with a good school, you moved there and you got a great education. Lots of kids couldn't. And so this notion of trying to create the best of what a school system could be, and to do it at scale seemed pretty important.
Still don't know what I was waiting for. And my
the best picture of David Bowie I could find. Believe me, there's a different David Bowie, we all know.
Got it made, it seemed.
So the landscape was, now on a kind of national level, we ought to really start thinking about change and what might be inevitable about that. So by 2005, you see this notion where there's roughly 3,000, 3,500, 3,600, charter public schools that have grown, quite a bit in a very short period of time. And what I would say is growing apart from the work. And with that, where that one went. So we were going to have Queen, but we didn't get there. And if we were to look today, so if we were to take that landscape today, because every one of us in the education field is under pressure. There is a tremendous amount of pressure on every single one of us to basically provide a parent's greatest treasure and assets with all they need. I mean, as a parent, I feel that for my youngsters, and we should just acknowledge that that is true. And that when they look to their youngsters' future, they look to teachers, principals, and superintendents and school leaders. So, we look back a year ago, it's 2011, 5,200 charters across this country, a big number. But I think we have entered the age of what I would call the crossover. And here's what I mean by the crossover. You have Stephen Pryor, former principal at Amistad Academy in Connecticut. You have John King, principal Roxbury Prep, a charter in Boston. You have Chris Barbick, the founder of Yes Prep in Houston. These guys are now the chief state schools officers in Connecticut and in New York, and running the Achievement School District in Tennessee. You have superintendents who are going over to do charters. You have charter leaders who are doing school district superintendencies, and the lines begin to get blurred. You have charter public schools that are unionized and doing really well and bringing lots of the robustness of a collective bargaining setting to the community that they serve. So we're watching a lot of blends. As we watch the blends, we should also acknowledge that there are 55 million youth in this country at K-12, 2.1 million in charter schools, 1.5 million being homeschooled. It's a small number of kids in the charter school space. Small and perhaps significant, but small nonetheless. Lots of my friends who are in the charter school space talk about the charter space as being Apple, 5% of market share, everyone watching what they're doing. Maybe, maybe not. But the reality of this is, if we're going to move the needle for every youth in this country, this can't be done by charter schools. It just is not going to happen. The reality of this is something wrong. So, John Mayer's song, Waiting for the World to Change, a number of us have looked at this landscape just like you are doing in Rhode Island and in Providence and say, we can't just wait. You know, we really need to be doing more than that.
Here come old flat top, he come grooving up slowly. Got
So we thought a little bit more about the notion that we should really begin to come together and look at the things we could do. When we looked at the landscape of the way charters and school districts were working together, this is what we saw. That basically 95% of the charter public schools in this country are in the lower left corner of the 2x2. They were operating in a competitive environment, and they were attempting to win the game through execution. Try to do the common thing uncommonly well. And quite frankly, hold up the neighborhood school as not doing it as well. That's the current landscape. We don't think we get as many winners with that as we would do if we were to look at more cooperation. If kids benefit from the secret sauce that a school district has, or a public high school has, or a charter middle school has, let's share the secret sauce. Let's do better than just be competitive. And, quite frankly, that just winning at the execution game the way we know it today is not nearly as good as looking at what are the opportunities to learn and to be innovative around the corner. So this notion of a next generation delivery model, this notion of a collaborative, cooperative spirit seemed to be pretty important to us. The way I would put it, we found that there's more common ground than there is battleground. And we were focused on the battleground. And I think in all of these collaborations, I know the work that Sue and Steve are doing in Providence, this is more about common ground, less about battleground in the next generation.
together we'll stand, divided we'll fall. Come on now, people, let's get on the ball and work together.
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can't go on? While you see it your way, on the risk of knowing that our love may soon be gone.
A little less conversation, a little more action, please. All this aggravation ain't satisfaction in me.
So, we think that lots of folks could come together, that we could really begin to work it out, and that the youngsters get the advantage. So, with that in mind, we began to sit down with places that thought they could really come together. That high-performing charters and the school districts that either authorized them or where they resided, would come together around issues of equity, around issues of caring, issues of innovation, in the interest of all kids. So today there are 16 proof points. At early stages in their work across the country, serving about 2.8 million kids, or roughly 5% of the students nationally right now when you put the kids in a high-performing charter and in a district together. And we basically said the school district superintendent gets to determine whether or not the charters are high-performing or not. Because in our point of view, low-performing charters shouldn't be around. We really ought to not have low-quality seats when we can have high-quality seats. And that's the purpose. The more high-quality seats there are, the more intentional we are about it, the better off we would be. So if you take a look at those places, you see large school systems, small school systems. You see them spread across the country. You see them come together with the endorsement of their boards, in some cases with endorsements from their union leadership. So it's a sort of look that everyone is taking locally in order to think about the larger picture. So those are the places. I'll talk a little bit about what some of the things look like. There was a compact, and we have a compact and we have an RFP process that we are supporting at the moment. And it was to recognize and celebrate leaders who operate with courage. It's to foster collaboration. It's to basically ensure equity for all kids and to ultimately see if we can get the kids to have greater opportunities. These are some things we're seeing across the country. And I guess what I'd like to do is start with those things that are irritating on both sides of the equation. So as a school district superintendent, there are some things that were both irritating to me and particularly irritating to my high school principals and high school teachers. And one of the ones that was really irritating to a district high school principal is the fact that the charters in the community could cut off enrollment after first semester of 10th grade. It just didn't seem like a level playing field. It just didn't seem to be the way in which we could all learn from one another. So in Denver, that's one of the pieces of the compact, that they've opened enrollment all the way through. And it's a real plus. And at the same time, the district has said these two high-performing charter organizations, Denver School of Science and Technology and West Denver Prep, will have the opportunity to educate 30% or more of the secondary school kids in the city of Denver. That the working of co-developing principals, of teachers interning in both places, in traditional public schools with the residence area, all important. So when you look down that list, you can see the kinds of things that are getting done. You can see the notion that everybody operates from a common enrollment process. You see the notion that the charters are committed to serving students with special needs completely and fully. It means some learning has to get done. Some sharing has to get done. Disenrollment processes are very different than the case where a charter school might be sending kids quietly, having them leave, and then they show up Monday on the doorstep of the neighborhood public school. No, we should stop that. We can all win. 1 + 1 could be 3. We are seeing efforts around human capital, around college-ready tools and supports, innovative instructional delivery models, and sort of expanded use of data. If you've got good data and the district has it and the charters could benefit from it, let's share that. So these are examples. Around how we're getting an equity in these 16 places. Access to all schools, mechanisms for real informed choice, so important to parents. We're in the midst of doing a competition now, actually doing 2 of them. One around the RFP for collaboration and the compact work itself, and the second is one around facilities funding. Because one of the things we find is that there are buildings that are fallow that could really be used, and if we could put some dollars behind that in a place like Central Falls to support the buildings so that the district gets a building that's now ready for 21st century learning, for hybrid delivery, a really nice thing to do. Everybody gains. So we're working our way through that. We think that at the end of the day, these 16 cities, will continue to work at it with some level of funding, some learning from one another, and some facility support, and we'll see college-ready rates go up. It's our hope. That is indeed the theme song of most negotiations, whether it is with a collective bargaining unit in the district, whether it's collaboration between the districts and the high-performing charters, between the city and the educational leaders. All of these things are key. So Warren gave me 25 minutes, so I got about a minute or 2 left, and want to say that this is early in the work, and we're watching these 16 places. We anticipate that there'll be 7 or 8 more before the end of the year. We're also really happy to note that the federal government is putting forth a proposal that will celebrate districts and charters working together. I think that will be a good thing, and we can begin to end the adult skirmishes and move towards the interest of kids. So that's the overall play around this, and hope that we can engage in some conversation about it. And I would also like to publicly thank Central Falls, Rhode Island. I got to spend the day there today, and think that the compact work that the district and the charters are doing, along with Mayor Dan McGee, will be so helpful. And I think the work that's going on in Providence with UP and Steve and Sue does the same thing. So I will get out of the national way. Thank you so much for inviting me, and we'll go on to the panel.